The most powerful thing you can say in any conversation. Introduction. Most people enter conversations with the wrong objective. They want to sound intelligent. They want to impress. They want to persuade. They want to prove a point. They want to be right. But the most influential communicators understand something that most people never learn. The power of a conversation is not determined by how much you say. It is determined by what the other person feels after speaking with you. Think about the people who have had the greatest impact on your life. Were they always the smartest people in the room? Not necessarily. Were they the loudest? Probably not. What made them memorable was something deeper. They made people feel understood, valued, respected, heard. And that ability often came from a surprisingly simple phrase. A phrase so powerful that it can transform relationships, reduce conflict, build trust, and create influence almost instantly. Most people overlook it because it sounds ordinary. Yet used correctly, it becomes one of the strongest communication tools available. Because in a world where everyone wants to be heard, very few people know how to make others feel understood. Why conversations often fail. Many conversations fail for a simple reason: people are not truly communicating. They are waiting for their turn. Someone speaks. The other person appears to listen. But internally, they are preparing a response, thinking about their own opinion, planning their next argument, searching for something clever to say. As a result, neither person feels fully heard. And when people do not feel heard, they become defensive. They repeat themselves. Speak louder. Argue harder. Not because they enjoy conflict. Because they are searching for understanding. This is why communication problems often have less to do with words and more to do with emotional needs. People want acknowledgement, recognition, validation. Not necessarily agreement, understanding. The hidden desire behind every conversation contains two levels. The first level is the content, the facts, the opinions, the information. The second level is emotional, the desire to feel respected, accepted, valued, safe. Most people focus entirely on the first level. The most effective communicators focus on both. Because beneath nearly every discussion lies an unspoken question: do you understand me? When that question is answered positively, trust grows. When it is ignored, resistance grows. And that is why one simple phrase can become so powerful. It answers the emotional question hidden beneath the conversation. Chapter 1. The 4 words that instantly change conversations. There are countless books on communication, thousands of articles, endless videos, experts teaching persuasion, negotiation, influence, leadership, and emotional intelligence. Yet one of the most powerful communication tools can be expressed in just 4 words: help me understand that. Simple, respectful, curious, and incredibly effective. At first glance, the phrase seems ordinary, almost too ordinary. How could 4 simple words transform conversations? Because those words accomplish something most people never do. They communicate genuine curiosity. And curiosity is one of the fastest ways to lower defensiveness and build trust. Why most conversations become battles. Think about what happens when people disagree. One person shares an opinion. The other person immediately responds. Sometimes politely. Sometimes aggressively. But the pattern is usually the same. The focus shifts from understanding to convincing. From learning to winning. From curiosity to certainty. The conversation becomes a contest. And contests create resistance. When people feel they are being challenged, they naturally protect their beliefs. The harder you push, the harder they resist. This is why many arguments become louder but not more productive. More words. Less understanding. More emotion. Less connection. The power of curiosity. Curiosity changes everything. Curiosity says, I want to know more. Not, I want to defeat you. Curiosity creates psychological safety. It allows people to explain themselves, to elaborate, to clarify, to feel heard. This does not mean you agree with them. It means you are interested in understanding their perspective before judging it. And understanding creates opportunities that confrontation rarely does. What "help me understand that" really means the phrase is powerful because of what it communicates. It says, I am listening. I am not rushing to judgment. Your perspective matters. I want clarity before conclusions. I respect you enough to hear you out. Notice what is absent. There is no accusation, no criticism, no attack, no defensiveness, just curiosity. And curiosity invites conversation. Why people open up? Human beings are naturally drawn toward people who make them feel understood. When someone asks, help me understand that, the emotional atmosphere changes. The other person relaxes. Defenses lower. They become more willing to explain their reasoning. Sometimes they even discover weaknesses in their own position while explaining it. Not because they were attacked. Because they were invited to think more deeply. The difference between curiosity and interrogation, of course, tone matters. A sincere, help me understand that, feels completely different from a sarcastic, help me understand that. The words are identical. The intention is not. Real curiosity seeks insight. Fake curiosity seeks ammunition. People can usually tell the difference. If your goal is influence, sincerity matters. Because trust cannot grow in the absence of authenticity. Why this phrase works in conflict. Conflict often creates assumptions. We assume we know what the other person means. We assume we understand their motives. We assume we know their reasoning. Many arguments exist because of these assumptions. Help me understand that interrupts the assumption cycle. Instead of guessing, you ask. Instead of reacting, you investigate. Instead of escalating, you explore. That shift alone can completely change the direction of a conversation. The leadership advantage. Great leaders use this principle constantly. When employees make mistakes, weak leaders attack. Strong leaders investigate. They ask questions. They seek understanding. Because understanding reveals information. Information reveals causes. And causes reveal solutions. Leaders who are curious learn more. And leaders who learn more make better decisions. Why understanding comes before influence. Many people want influence without understanding. They want to persuade before they listen. Convince before they learn. Teach before they comprehend. This approach rarely works, because influence begins with understanding. The better you understand someone's concerns, fears, goals, and values, the more effectively you can communicate with them. Understanding creates connection. Connection creates trust. Trust creates influence. The hidden gift of listening. When you say, help me understand that, you are giving the other person a gift. Your attention. In today's world, attention is rare. Most people are distracted. Multitasking. Waiting to speak. Thinking about themselves. The willingness to focus completely on another person's perspective is surprisingly powerful. People remember it. Because so few experience it. When you strongly disagree. The phrase becomes especially valuable when disagreement exists. Most people expect opposition. They expect criticism. They expect resistance. They do not expect curiosity. Imagine someone shares an opinion you strongly dislike. Instead of attacking, you ask, help me understand how you arrived at that conclusion. Now the conversation changes. You gather information. You reduce assumptions. And you create the possibility of meaningful dialogue. The 4 words that build trust. Trust grows when people feel understood. Not necessarily agreed with. Understood. This distinction matters. You can completely disagree with someone while still making them feel heard. And people are far more receptive to disagreement when they first feel understood. That is one reason these 4 words are so powerful. They create the conditions necessary for trust. The communication habit that changes everything. Imagine applying this phrase consistently. With coworkers, friends, family members, customers, employees, strangers. Whenever confusion appears, curiosity replaces assumption. Whenever disagreement appears, understanding comes first. Whenever tension rises, questions replace reactions. Over time, this habit transforms communication. Not because it solves every problem, because it improves every conversation. The most powerful thing you can say. Many people search for the perfect argument, the perfect comeback, the perfect persuasive technique. Yet one of the most powerful things you can say is remarkably simple: help me understand that. Because those 4 words communicate respect, curiosity, humility, patience, and emotional intelligence. Qualities that build trust far more effectively than clever arguments ever could. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people rarely remember your best argument. They rarely remember your cleverest point. But they remember how you made them feel. And when someone feels understood, something powerful happens. Defenses lower. Trust grows. Conversations deepen. Influence becomes possible, all because of 4 simple words: help me understand that. Chapter 2. Why feeling understood is more powerful than being right. Most people enter conversations with a hidden goal: to be right. To prove their point, to defend their position, to demonstrate that their perspective is correct. On the surface, this seems reasonable. After all, if you believe something is true, why wouldn't you want others to recognize it? But there is a problem. Being right and being effective are not always the same thing. Many people win arguments and lose relationships, win debates and lose trust, win points and lose influence. The reason is simple. Human beings care deeply about being understood, often more deeply than they care about being corrected. The need beneath the words. When people talk, they are usually communicating more than information. Beneath the facts lies emotion. Beneath the opinions lies experience. Beneath the arguments lies identity. This means that conversations operate on 2 levels. The visible level. Facts. Ideas, opinions, decisions. And the invisible level. Respect. Recognition, validation, understanding. Most people focus only on the visible level. The most effective communicators pay attention to both, because the invisible level often determines the outcome. Why people repeat themselves. Have you ever noticed that when someone feels unheard, they repeat themselves? They explain again, and again, and again. Not necessarily because they have new information, because they do not feel understood. The repetition is not a communication problem. It is an emotional signal. It is the mind saying, "You haven't heard me yet." This happens in workplaces, relationships, families, friendships, and almost every type of disagreement. People continue talking until they feel acknowledged. The hidden frustration. One of the most frustrating experiences in life is feeling misunderstood. You know what you meant. You know your intentions, yet someone interprets your words differently. The more you try to explain, the more disconnected you feel. This frustration is universal. Everyone has experienced it. And because everyone has experienced it, everyone appreciates people who genuinely try to understand. Why understanding lowers defenses. Imagine someone disagrees with you. Before presenting their opinion, they say, "I think I understand where you're coming from." Immediately, something changes. You become less defensive, less guarded, more willing to listen. Why? Because understanding creates safety. The mind no longer feels under attack. And when people feel safe, they become more open to new ideas. The emotional shortcut to trust. Trust is often misunderstood. Many people think trust develops only through time. Time certainly helps. But trust also develops through understanding. When someone listens carefully, acknowledges your perspective, makes an effort to see your point of view, trust grows surprisingly quickly, because understanding communicates respect, and respect is the foundation of trust. The difference between agreement and understanding. One of the most important communication lessons is this: understanding does not require agreement. You can understand someone completely and still disagree. These are separate concepts. Unfortunately, many people confuse them. They assume, if I try to understand them, I'm admitting they're right. Not true. Understanding simply means you comprehend their perspective. Agreement is a separate decision. The ability to separate these two concepts dramatically improves communication. Why being right can become a trap. Being right feels good. It satisfies the ego, provides validation, creates certainty. But the pursuit of being right can become dangerous, because it often shifts attention away from understanding. People become so focused on proving their point that they stop listening, stop learning, stop connecting. The conversation becomes a competition, and competitions rarely create trust. The relationship test. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, you prove someone wrong. You win the argument, but they leave feeling embarrassed and disrespected. In the second, you disagree respectfully. You seek understanding. You maintain the relationship. Which outcome creates more long-term influence? Usually the second. Because relationships matter. And relationships are strengthened through understanding, not domination. Why validation matters. Validation is often misunderstood. Many people think validation means agreeing. It does not. Validation means acknowledging that someone's feelings or experiences make sense from their perspective. For example, I can understand why you'd feel that way. This statement does not necessarily indicate agreement. It indicates understanding. And understanding is incredibly powerful, because people who feel validated become less defensive. The power of emotional recognition. Sometimes people do not need solutions. They need recognition. Recognition that their experience matters. Recognition that their feelings are real. Recognition that they have been heard. This does not solve every problem, but it often creates the emotional conditions necessary to solve problems. People think more clearly when they feel understood. Listening is an act of respect. True listening is rare. Most people listen partially, temporarily, selectively. They hear enough to formulate a response. But deep listening is different. Deep listening communicates, you matter. Your perspective matters. I'm paying attention. This kind of listening creates connection. And connection creates influence. Why influence requires understanding. Many people want influence without empathy, persuasion without listening, leadership without understanding. It rarely works. Because influence depends on trust. And trust depends on understanding. The more accurately you understand people, the more effectively you can communicate with them. Understanding becomes the bridge between perspectives. The cost of feeling ignored. When people feel ignored, they often react in predictable ways. They become louder, more emotional, more repetitive, more defensive. These reactions are frequently misinterpreted. Others assume the person is difficult. But often, the real issue is simple: they do not feel heard. Address the need for understanding, and many conflicts begin to soften. The most memorable conversations. Think about the best conversations you have ever had. What made them memorable? Usually it was not the information. It was the feeling. The feeling of being understood, accepted, respected, seen. That feeling creates a lasting impression, because understanding satisfies a deep human need. Why great communicators focus on people? Weak communicators focus only on information. Strong communicators focus on people. Information matters, but people interpret information through emotion, experience, identity, values. The best communicators understand this. They communicate with both the mind and the heart. The real goal. The goal of communication is not always agreement. Sometimes agreement is impossible. Different experiences produce different perspectives. Different values produce different conclusions. The real goal is often understanding. Because understanding remains possible even when agreement does not. And understanding creates respect. The strongest position. Ironically, people often become more open to your perspective after they feel understood. Not before. After. This is why understanding is so powerful. It lowers defenses, builds trust, creates connection, and makes meaningful dialogue possible. The person who seeks understanding first often gains more influence than the person who seeks victory first. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: most people want to be right. Few people want to understand. Yet understanding is what creates trust. Understanding is what strengthens relationships. Understanding is what opens minds. And understanding is what makes influence possible. Because at the deepest level, every person wants the same thing: to feel heard, to feel valued, to feel understood. And when you provide that feeling, you become someone people genuinely want to listen to. Chapter 3. The psychology behind why people open up to certain people instantly. Have you ever met someone and found yourself sharing things you normally wouldn't tell a stranger? Maybe it happened within minutes. A conversation started. The connection felt natural. Before long, you were talking about personal experiences, fears, goals, frustrations, or dreams. Then there are other people. People you've known for years. Yet you never feel completely comfortable around them. You remain guarded, careful, reserved. Why does this happen? Why do some people make us feel safe almost instantly, while others struggle to earn our trust no matter how long we've known them? The answer has very little to do with charisma, and far more to do with psychology. The human need for safety. Before people open up, they need one thing: safety. Not physical safety, emotional safety. The feeling that they can speak honestly without being attacked, judged, ridiculed, or dismissed. This need is deeply rooted in human nature. For thousands of years, social acceptance was linked to survival. Being rejected by the group carried serious consequences. As a result, the human brain constantly evaluates social environments. It asks questions such as, can I trust this person? Will they judge me? Will they use this information against me? Am I safe here? People open up when those questions receive positive answers. Why people don't trust words. One of the biggest communication mistakes is assuming trust is built through words alone. It isn't. People pay far more attention to behavior. You can say, "You can trust me." But if your actions communicate something different, trust disappears. The brain watches for consistency. It compares what people say with what they do. When the two align, trust grows. When they conflict, trust weakens. This is why trustworthy people feel authentic. Their words and actions match. The power of non-judgment. Nothing shuts people down faster than judgment. The moment people feel judged, they become cautious, careful, defensive, selective. They stop revealing who they really are. Because vulnerability feels dangerous, people who create openness understand this. They listen without immediately evaluating, without immediately criticizing, without immediately offering unsolicited advice. They create space. And space allows honesty to emerge. Why good listeners feel magnetic. Some people have a magnetic quality. Others naturally gravitate toward them. Not because they are the most entertaining. Not because they are the most attractive. Not because they dominate conversations. Because they listen exceptionally well. Listening communicates importance. It tells the other person, what you're saying matters. In a world where many people compete for attention, genuine attention feels powerful. Almost rare. And rarity creates value. The secret of emotional validation. One reason people open up quickly to certain individuals is emotional validation. Validation means acknowledging another person's emotional experience. For example, "That sounds incredibly difficult. I can understand why that upset you. That makes sense." Notice what these statements do not say. They do not necessarily agree. They do not necessarily solve the problem. They simply acknowledge the emotional reality of the other person. That acknowledgement builds connection. Why people trust those who understand. Trust is not created by perfection. It is created by understanding. Many people believe they must impress others to earn trust. The opposite is often true. People trust those who understand them. Those who listen. Those who make an effort to see their perspective. Understanding communicates care. And care creates connection. The danger of constant advice. Many conversations break down because people rush into advice mode. Someone shares a problem. Immediately, solutions appear. Suggestions. Recommendations. Instructions. Advice has value. But timing matters. Often people need understanding before solutions. If someone feels unheard, advice can feel dismissive. The message becomes, "Let me fix you," instead of, "Let me understand you." And understanding usually comes first. Why vulnerability creates connection. Human beings connect through vulnerability, not perfection. Perfection creates distance. Vulnerability creates relatability. When someone shares an honest struggle, mistake, fear, or uncertainty, something interesting happens. Others feel safer doing the same. This is called reciprocal vulnerability. Openness encourages openness. Honesty encourages honesty. Trust grows in both directions. The mirror effect. People tend to mirror emotional behavior. If someone is calm, others often become calmer. If someone is open, others often become more open. If someone is defensive, others become defensive. This means that the emotional atmosphere you create influences the people around you. The individuals who inspire openness understand this principle. They embody the qualities they hope to receive. Curiosity makes people feel important. One of the fastest ways to build rapport is genuine curiosity. Not interrogation. Curiosity. People enjoy talking with those who show sincere interest in their experiences, their ideas, their stories, their perspectives. Why? Because curiosity communicates value. It says, "You are interesting. Your experiences matter. I want to know more." This creates a powerful emotional response. Why some conversations feel effortless. Effortless conversations usually share common characteristics. There is little judgment, little competition, little need to impress. The focus remains on connection rather than performance. People feel free to be themselves. And authenticity creates ease. The best conversationalists understand this. They are not trying to win. They are trying to connect. The role of presence. Presence is one of the most underrated communication skills. Presence means giving someone your full attention. Not checking your phone. Not scanning the room. Not thinking about your next response. Simply being there. Fully engaged. Most people underestimate how noticeable presence is. People can feel when they have your attention. And they can feel when they don't. Why people remember feelings more than facts years from now. Most people will not remember every detail of your conversations. But they will remember how they felt around you. Respected. Ignored. Valued. Dismissed. Understood. Judged. Those emotional impressions last. Because human memory is strongly connected to emotion. This is why emotional experience often matters more than informational content. The trust formula. People tend to open up when several conditions exist. They feel safe. They feel heard. They feel respected. They feel understood. They feel accepted. They feel valued. When these conditions are present, trust develops naturally. Not instantly. But surprisingly quickly. Because human beings are constantly searching for environments where they can be authentic. Becoming the person people open up to. If you want people to trust you, focus less on being impressive and more on being present. Listen more. Judge less. Understand before advising. Validate before correcting. Ask questions before making assumptions. People rarely open up because someone is brilliant. They open up because someone feels safe. The real reason. Ultimately, people open up to certain individuals because those individuals meet a deep emotional need. The need to be accepted without immediate judgment. The need to be understood without immediate correction. The need to be heard without interruption. When that need is met, trust begins. And where trust exists, meaningful conversations become possible. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people do not open up because you have the perfect words. They open up because of how you make them feel. Safe. Heard. Understood. Valued. The most powerful communicators are not necessarily the most persuasive. They are the most trustworthy. And trust begins the moment another person feels emotionally safe in your presence. That is why some people can build deep connections in minutes while others struggle for years. Because connection is not created by impressing people. It is created by understanding them. Chapter 4. The one phrase that instantly makes people feel heard. Most people think listening is enough. They remain silent. They nod. They maintain eye contact. And while these behaviors are important, they are only part of the process. Because listening and making someone feel heard are not the same thing. A person can listen quietly and still leave the other person feeling misunderstood. Why? Because people do not just want their words received. They want their message understood. And there is one phrase that accomplishes this remarkably well: what I'm hearing is. Simple. Powerful. Transformative. This phrase can change the entire direction of a conversation. Because it answers one of the deepest questions in the human mind: did you actually understand me? Why people crave understanding. Every day, people communicate countless thoughts, feelings, and experiences. But communication is fragile. Words are imperfect. Meanings get lost. Intentions become misunderstood. Assumptions fill the gaps. As a result, many conversations create confusion rather than clarity. People often leave discussions thinking, "That's not what I meant. They completely misunderstood me. They weren't really listening." The frustration is not about talking. It is about failing to feel understood. The hidden fear in every conversation. Most people carry an invisible fear into conversations. The fear of being misunderstood. This fear appears everywhere. In relationships. At work. With friends. With family. Even with strangers. When people sense misunderstanding, they become defensive. They repeat themselves. Explain more. Increase emotional intensity. Not because they enjoy conflict. Because they are trying to bridge the gap between what they mean and what others hear. Why? What I'm hearing is. Works. This phrase creates clarity. It allows you to reflect back what you believe the other person is saying. For example, what I'm hearing is that you felt ignored during the meeting. Or, what I'm hearing is that you're worried about what might happen next. Notice what happens. The speaker now has an opportunity to confirm or correct. They can say, "Exactly," or, "Not quite. Let me explain." Either response improves understanding, and understanding improves communication. The power of reflection. Psychologists often refer to this technique as reflective listening. Reflective listening involves summarizing another person's message in your own words. This accomplishes several things at once. It proves you were listening. It reduces misunderstandings. It encourages clarification. It makes the speaker feel valued. Most importantly, it creates emotional connection. Because feeling understood is one of the strongest emotional experiences in communication. Why agreement is not required. Many people hesitate to use reflective listening because they confuse understanding with agreement. They think, if I reflect their perspective, I'm agreeing with it. Not true. You can understand someone completely and still disagree. For example, what I'm hearing is that you believe this decision is unfair. This statement communicates understanding, not agreement. The distinction is critical, because people become more receptive to disagreement after they feel understood. The fastest way to reduce defensiveness: imagine someone is upset. They are frustrated, emotional, defensive. Most people respond by offering solutions or counterarguments. But often, the fastest way to reduce defensiveness is simply reflecting their perspective. For example, what I'm hearing is that you feel like your concerns weren't taken seriously. Immediately, the emotional atmosphere changes. The person feels recognized. Their experience has been acknowledged. And acknowledgement often lowers emotional intensity. Why people say, exactly. One of the most satisfying moments in communication occurs when someone responds, exactly. That single word tells you something important. It means the person feels understood. It means the gap between intention and interpretation has narrowed. It means trust is growing. Many conflicts begin to soften the moment someone feels accurately understood. The problem with assumptions. Assumptions are one of the greatest enemies of communication. People assume they know what others mean. Assume they know motivations. Assume they understand emotions. Often they are wrong. Reflective listening eliminates much of this guesswork. Instead of assuming, you verify. Instead of guessing, you clarify. And clarity prevents countless misunderstandings. The relationship advantage. Relationships often suffer not because of a lack of love, but because of a lack of understanding. Partners frequently hear each other's words, but fail to hear the meaning behind those words. A simple reflection can completely change the dynamic. For example, what I'm hearing is that you need more support right now. That statement communicates attention, care, effort. And effort matters. Because people appreciate those who genuinely try to understand them. Why reflection creates emotional safety. Emotional safety develops when people feel they can express themselves without being dismissed. Reflective listening contributes to this safety. Because it communicates, I'm paying attention. Your perspective matters. I'm trying to understand. These messages create trust, and trust encourages openness. The leadership application. Great leaders use reflection constantly. When employees share concerns, effective leaders do not immediately jump into solutions. They first ensure understanding. They say things like, what I'm hearing is that the workload has become overwhelming. Or, what I'm hearing is that you're concerned about the timeline. This approach improves morale and communication simultaneously. Because people support leaders who make them feel heard. Reflection builds influence. Influence does not begin when you speak. It begins when people trust you. And trust grows when people feel understood. Reflective listening accelerates this process. It demonstrates empathy, attention, respect, and emotional intelligence. All of these qualities strengthen influence. Why most people never do this? The technique sounds simple. And that is precisely why many people ignore it. They underestimate its power. They believe communication success comes from clever arguments, powerful speeches, persuasive language. But the strongest communicators know a secret. People are more influenced by those who understand them than by those who simply talk to them. The phrase that changes everything. Imagine how many conflicts could be reduced by a simple habit. Before responding, reflect. Before arguing, clarify. Before persuading, understand. The phrase, what I'm hearing is, creates a pause. A moment of verification. A moment of connection. And often, that moment changes everything. The communication breakthrough. Many people spend years trying to become better speakers. Far fewer spend time becoming better understanders. Yet understanding is the foundation of meaningful communication. Because communication is not just about transmitting information. It is about creating shared understanding. And shared understanding begins with reflection. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people do not feel heard when you remain silent. They feel heard when they know you understand. And one of the simplest ways to demonstrate understanding is to reflect what they are saying. Not to agree. Not to persuade. Simply to understand. Because the moment someone feels understood, trust begins to grow. Defenses begin to lower. And real communication finally becomes possible. All because of one simple phrase: what I'm hearing is. Chapter 5. Why the best communicators talk less and understand more. Most people assume great communicators are great talkers. They imagine charismatic speakers, powerful storytellers, confident debaters, people who always know exactly what to say. And while speaking skills matter, they are not what makes communication truly powerful. In fact, many of the most influential people in the world share a surprising habit: they talk less than most people expect. They listen more, observe more, ask more questions, and spend more time understanding than explaining. This seems backward. After all, how can talking less make you a better communicator? The answer lies in understanding what communication is really about. The misunderstanding about communication: most people think communication is the transfer of information. One person speaks. Another person listens. Information moves from one mind to another. Simple. But real communication is much deeper. Communication is not merely about transmitting information. It is about creating understanding. And understanding requires more than talking. It requires listening, observation, patience, curiosity. Without these elements, words become noise. Why most people listen poorly? The average person listens for one reason: to respond. Not to understand, to respond. As soon as someone begins speaking, the listener's mind starts working. Preparing arguments, planning responses, searching for advice, thinking about personal experiences. The result is predictable. The listener hears some of the words, but misses much of the meaning. And meaning is where understanding lies. Listening is a competitive advantage. Because so few people truly listen, listening has become a competitive advantage. In business, leadership, relationships, negotiation, sales, friendship, almost everywhere, people are naturally drawn toward those who make them feel understood. Not because understanding is flashy. Because it is rare. And rarity creates value. The person who learns the most. Imagine two people entering a conversation. One speaks 80% of the time. The other listens 80% of the time. Who learns more? The answer is obvious: the listener. The speaker already knows what they think. The listener gains access to new information, new perspectives, new insights. This is why wise communicators often spend more time gathering information than expressing opinions. Information creates understanding. And understanding creates influence. Why talking too much weakens influence? Many people believe influence comes from explaining more, providing more evidence, offering more arguments, giving more details. Sometimes it does. Often it does not. Excessive talking can actually reduce influence. Because people stop feeling heard. The conversation becomes one-sided. The focus shifts from understanding to broadcasting. And people resist those who seem more interested in speaking than listening. The confidence of silence. Insecure communicators often feel uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill every pause, every gap, every moment of stillness. Confident communicators behave differently. They allow silence. They think before speaking. They give conversations room to breathe. This creates an interesting effect. Their words carry more weight because they are chosen carefully, not delivered impulsively. Understanding before responding. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is delaying your response. Not forever. Just long enough to ensure understanding. Before sharing your opinion, ask yourself, do I fully understand what this person means? If the answer is no, continue exploring. Ask questions. Clarify. Reflect. Because responding to what someone actually means is far more effective than responding to what you assume they mean. Why questions beat speeches? Many communicators rely heavily on statements. Great communicators rely heavily on questions. Questions create engagement, curiosity, exploration, discovery. Questions encourage people to think. And people trust conclusions they reach themselves more than conclusions imposed upon them. This is why skilled communicators often ask rather than tell. They guide rather than lecture. The information advantage. Imagine entering a negotiation. One person spends most of the conversation talking. The other spends most of the conversation listening. Who has the advantage? Usually the listener. Because information is power. The listener learns. Motivations, concerns, priorities, goals, fears. This information becomes valuable, not for manipulation, for understanding. And understanding improves decision making. Listening creates trust. Trust grows when people feel heard. Not when they feel managed. Not when they feel corrected. Not when they feel lectured. Heard. The act of listening communicates respect. It signals. You matter. Your perspective matters. Your experience matters. Those messages strengthen relationships. And strong relationships create influence. Why smart people sometimes communicate poorly. Intelligence and communication are not the same thing. Some highly intelligent individuals struggle in conversations. Not because they lack knowledge. Because they lack listening skills. They become focused on demonstrating expertise. Proving competence. Showing how much they know. As a result, they stop paying attention. And communication suffers. Knowledge is valuable. But understanding is what connects knowledge to people. The hidden message of listening. Every behavior communicates something. Interrupting communicates one message. Listening communicates another. When you truly listen, you communicate. You are worth my attention. This message is surprisingly powerful. Because attention is one of the most valuable resources we possess. Giving it freely creates connection. The best conversations feel balanced. Think about the conversations you enjoy most. They probably share a common characteristic. Balance. Neither person dominates. Neither person competes constantly for attention. Both people contribute. Both people listen. Both people feel valued. Balance creates comfort. And comfort encourages openness. Why understanding is more valuable than being interesting. Many people focus on becoming more interesting. They want better stories. Better jokes. Better opinions. Those things have value. But there is something even more valuable: being interested. People enjoy conversations with those who are genuinely curious. Who ask thoughtful questions. Who pay attention. Who care. Because everyone enjoys feeling important. And curiosity communicates importance. The leadership lesson. Exceptional leaders understand this principle deeply. They know leadership is not simply giving instructions. It is understanding people. Understanding concerns. Understanding motivations. Understanding challenges. The more leaders understand, the better they lead. The same principle applies to communication. The more you understand, the more effective you become. The listening habit. Imagine entering every conversation with one goal: understanding before being understood. This single habit changes everything. You interrupt less. Assume less. Judge less. React less. And learn more. Over time, people begin responding differently to you. Because they feel heard. Respected. Valued. The quiet strength. Talking less does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean suppressing your opinions. It does not mean avoiding difficult conversations. It means being intentional. Speaking when your words add value. Listening when understanding is needed. Choosing quality over quantity. This balance creates a quiet strength that people naturally respect. The real secret. The best communicators are not always the best speakers. Often, they are the best listeners. Because they understand something many people miss, every conversation contains information, emotion, meaning, opportunity. And the only way to access those things is through genuine attention. The person who understands the most often influences the most. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: most people enter conversations hoping to be heard. The best communicators enter conversations hoping to understand. They listen more than they speak. Ask more than they tell. Learn more than they assume. Because communication is not a performance. It is a connection. And connection grows when understanding comes first. That is why the most influential people in any room are often not the loudest. They are the people paying the closest attention. Chapter 6. The 5 words that instantly deepen any conversation. Most conversations stay on the surface. People discuss the weather, work, current events, daily routines, responsibilities, schedules, tasks. The exchange is polite, comfortable, predictable, but rarely memorable, rarely meaningful, rarely transformative. Why? Because most people spend their conversations exchanging information rather than exploring understanding. They discuss what happened, but not what it meant. They discuss events, but not emotions. They discuss outcomes, but not experiences. The result is a conversation that remains shallow. And shallow conversations rarely create deep connections. Why most conversations never go deeper? The average person fears vulnerability. Not consciously, but psychologically. Opening up creates risk. The risk of judgment, rejection, misunderstanding, embarrassment. As a result, many people stay in safe territory. They share facts, but hide feelings. Share stories, but hide struggles. Share opinions, but hide fears. The conversation remains comfortable, yet incomplete. The 5 powerful words. There is one simple question that has the power to transform an ordinary conversation into a meaningful one. How did that feel? 5 simple words. Yet they accomplish something extraordinary. They move the conversation from events to emotions, from facts to experiences, from surface-level discussion to genuine understanding. Because every event creates an emotional experience. And emotional experiences are where real connection lives. Why emotions matter. Many people underestimate the role emotions play in communication. They assume facts are more important. Logic is more important. Information is more important. Yet human beings remember emotions far longer than information. Years from now, someone may forget exactly what happened, but they will remember how it felt. The emotional experience often becomes the lasting memory. This is why conversations become deeper when emotions enter the discussion. The difference between facts and feelings. Imagine someone says, "I got promoted." Most people respond, "Congratulations," and the conversation moves on. But imagine asking, "How did that feel?" Suddenly everything changes. Now the person might reveal pride, relief, excitement, anxiety, gratitude, pressure. The conversation shifts from information to experience. And experience creates connection. Why people rarely ask. Interestingly, most people never ask emotional questions. Not because they don't care. Because they are distracted, focused on their own responses, their own stories, their own experiences. As a result, opportunities for deeper connection are missed. The people who build strong relationships understand something important. Curiosity about emotions creates intimacy. The emotional layer. Every story contains 2 versions. The external story and the internal story. The external story describes what happened. The internal story describes how it felt. Most conversations never reach the internal story. Yet that is where understanding becomes meaningful. Because emotions reveal significance. They reveal what truly matters to people. Why this question builds trust. Trust grows when people feel safe sharing emotions. The question, "How did that feel?" communicates permission. Permission to be honest. Permission to be human. Permission to go beyond facts. When asked sincerely, it creates emotional space. And emotional space encourages authenticity. The hidden need to be seen. Every person carries experiences that others never fully understand. Victories, losses, failures, dreams, fears, disappointments. Most people talk about the event. Very few people ask about the emotional impact. This is why emotional questions feel powerful. They communicate. I care about your experience. Not just your story. Your experience. Why relationships become stronger. Strong relationships are not built on information. They are built on understanding. And understanding requires emotional awareness. When people know your thoughts, they know you partially. When people know your emotions, they know you more deeply. This is why meaningful conversations often revolve around feelings rather than facts. Feelings reveal the person behind the story. The leadership advantage. Exceptional leaders ask emotional questions. Not because they are therapists. Because they understand people. Imagine an employee completes a difficult project. A typical manager asks, "Did everything get finished?" A great leader asks, "How did the process feel for you?" The second question reveals valuable information. Stress levels, morale, motivation, challenges, concerns. The emotional experience often contains insights that facts alone cannot provide. Why people remember. Great listeners think about the people you enjoy talking to most. What makes them special? Often it is not what they say. It is how they listen. Great listeners make people feel visible, understood, important. They ask questions that encourage reflection. Questions that reveal meaning. Questions that explore emotions. And people remember those conversations because they felt genuine. Moving beyond small talk. Small talk has value. It creates comfort, reduces social tension, builds familiarity. But meaningful relationships require more. They require emotional exploration. Not immediately. Not forcefully. Naturally. Gradually. And one of the easiest ways to move beyond small talk is through emotional questions. The courage to ask. Some people avoid emotional questions because they fear awkwardness. They worry about crossing boundaries, making others uncomfortable. Yet most people secretly appreciate thoughtful curiosity. They appreciate being asked about what matters. Especially when the question comes from genuine interest. Authenticity matters. People can feel the difference between curiosity and interrogation. The conversation shift. Notice what happens when emotional questions enter a discussion. The energy changes. The depth changes. The connection changes. The conversation becomes less transactional, more human, less informational, more meaningful. And meaning is what people remember. Understanding through emotion. Facts tell you what happened. Emotions tell you what mattered. This distinction is critical. If you only understand the facts, your understanding remains incomplete. If you understand the emotional experience, your understanding becomes richer, more accurate, more compassionate, more useful. Why vulnerability creates connection. When people talk about emotions, vulnerability often appears. And vulnerability creates connection. Not because vulnerability is weakness. Because vulnerability is honesty. It reveals the reality beneath the surface. The fears, the hopes, the uncertainty, the excitement, the humanity. And humanity is what connects us. The deepest conversations. The deepest conversations rarely begin with profound statements. They begin with thoughtful questions. Simple questions. Curious questions. Human questions. Questions that invite reflection. Questions that explore meaning. Questions like, how did that feel? 5 words. Yet capable of opening doors that facts alone never could. The real reason it works. Ultimately, this question works because it focuses on the person rather than the event. Most people ask about outcomes. This question asks about experiences. Most people ask what happened. This question asks what it meant. And meaning is where connection lies. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people do not connect through information alone. They connect through emotion. Through shared experiences. Through understanding. Through feeling seen. And one of the simplest ways to create that feeling is by asking, how did that feel? Because behind every story is an experience. Behind every experience is an emotion. And behind every emotion is a human being who wants to be understood. The people who understand this create conversations that others never forget. Chapter 7. Why people trust those who make them feel safe. Trust is one of the most valuable assets in human relationships. It cannot be bought. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be forced. And once broken, it can be difficult to rebuild. Yet some people seem to earn trust effortlessly. People confide in them. Open up to them. Seek their advice. Share their fears, dreams, and struggles. Others, despite being intelligent or successful, struggle to create the same level of trust. Why? Because trust is not built primarily through competence. It is built through safety. People trust those who make them feel emotionally safe. And emotional safety is one of the most powerful forces in communication. What is emotional safety? Emotional safety is the feeling that you can be yourself without fear of unnecessary judgment, ridicule, rejection, or humiliation. It means you can express an opinion, admit a mistake, share a concern, reveal a weakness, without immediately feeling attacked. When emotional safety exists, people relax. They become more honest, more authentic, more open. When emotional safety is absent, people become guarded, careful, defensive. They hide parts of themselves, not because they want to deceive, because they want to protect themselves. Why the human brain craves safety? The human brain is constantly scanning the environment for threats. Not just physical threats, social threats. For most of human history, social rejection could have serious consequences. Being excluded from the group often meant reduced chances of survival. As a result, our brains evolved to pay close attention to social danger. Even today, criticism, embarrassment, rejection, and humiliation can trigger powerful emotional reactions. The brain treats these experiences seriously, which means people naturally move toward those who feel safe and away from those who feel threatening. The fastest way to destroy trust: many people unknowingly destroy trust through judgment. Someone shares a mistake. They criticize. Someone shares a fear. They dismiss it. Someone shares a dream. They mock it. Someone shares an opinion. They attack it. These reactions send a clear message: it is not safe to be honest here. Once that message is received, openness begins to disappear. Trust starts to weaken. And communication becomes more superficial. Why judgment shuts people down? Judgment creates self-protection. The moment people feel judged, they begin filtering themselves. They reveal less, share less, risk less. Because honesty now carries emotional danger. Think about the people you trust most. Chances are they are not people who judge you constantly. They are people who make you feel accepted, even when they disagree. That acceptance creates safety. And safety creates trust. The difference between safe and agreeable: creating safety does not mean agreeing with everything. This is an important distinction. Some people believe emotional safety requires avoiding disagreement. Not true. You can disagree respectfully while still making someone feel safe. Safety comes from how disagreement is expressed. For example, "I see it differently, but I understand your perspective," feels very different from, "That's ridiculous." Both statements communicate disagreement. Only one maintains safety. Why people open up gradually. Trust is rarely built in a single moment. It develops through repeated experiences. Small moments. Consistent interactions. Each positive interaction sends a message: "You are safe here." Over time, those messages accumulate. And as trust grows, people reveal more of themselves. The process is gradual, but incredibly powerful. Consistency builds credibility. One of the strongest trust-building behaviors is consistency. People trust those who are predictable in their values and behavior. If someone is kind one day and cruel the next, uncertainty appears. And uncertainty weakens trust. Consistency creates reliability. Reliability creates confidence. Confidence creates trust. People want to know where they stand. The importance of confidentiality. Nothing destroys trust faster than betrayal. When people share something personal, they are taking a risk. They are offering vulnerability. If that vulnerability is exposed carelessly, trust can disappear instantly. Trustworthy people understand the value of discretion. They protect what others share. They respect boundaries. They recognize that trust is a responsibility, not just a privilege. Why listening creates safety. Listening is one of the clearest signals of emotional safety. When someone listens carefully, they communicate: "You matter. Your experience matters. Your perspective matters." People feel safer around those who genuinely listen. Because listening demonstrates respect. And respect is the foundation of trust. The power of calm reactions. Imagine telling someone something difficult. A mistake. A failure. A problem. Now imagine two responses. The first person reacts with anger. The second responds calmly. Who feels safer? The answer is obvious. Calm reactions create emotional security. People trust those who remain composed during difficult conversations. Because composure signals stability. And stability creates safety. Why acceptance matters. Acceptance is one of the deepest human needs. Not approval. Acceptance. People want to know they can be imperfect and still be valued. That they can make mistakes and still be respected. That they can struggle and still be worthy. When people feel accepted, trust flourishes. Because acceptance reduces fear. And fear is the enemy of openness. The leadership connection. The best leaders understand psychological safety. They know employees perform better when they feel safe to ask questions, admit mistakes, offer ideas, express concerns. Fear-based environments suppress honesty. Safe environments encourage it. The same principle applies to every relationship. People thrive where they feel safe. Why people remember safe people years later. People may forget what you said. They may forget your advice. Forget your stories. Forget your opinions. But they rarely forget how they felt around you. If they felt judged, they remember. If they felt accepted, they remember. If they felt safe, they remember. Because emotional experiences leave lasting impressions. Becoming a safe person. If you want people to trust you, focus less on being impressive and more on being safe. Listen carefully. Judge less. Respect boundaries. Respond calmly. Maintain confidentiality. Show consistency. Accept imperfections. These behaviors create an environment where trust can grow naturally. And trust is one of the most valuable gifts you can offer another person. The hidden influence of safety. People often assume influence comes from authority, status, knowledge, charisma. Sometimes it does. But one of the strongest forms of influence comes from trust. And trust begins with safety. People are more likely to follow, listen to, and learn from those they trust. Which means emotional safety is not just a relationship skill. It is a leadership skill. A communication skill, a life skill. The foundation of every meaningful relationship rests on trust. And every trusting relationship rests on safety. Without safety, honesty disappears. Without honesty, connection weakens. Without connection, relationships become shallow. Safety is the foundation. Everything else is built upon it. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people trust those who make them feel safe. Safe to speak. Safe to disagree. Safe to admit mistakes. Safe to be themselves. In a world where many people judge quickly, criticize easily, and react harshly, emotional safety has become rare. And rarity creates value. That is why the people who create safety often become the people others trust most. Because trust is not built through perfection. It is built through acceptance. Through consistency. Through understanding. And above all, through making another human being feel safe in your presence. Chapter 8. The conversation habit that makes people instantly like you. Many people spend years trying to become more likable. They study charisma, practice confidence, learn public speaking, work on their appearance, try to become more interesting. Yet they often overlook one of the simplest and most powerful habits in human interaction. A habit that requires no special talent, no extraordinary intelligence, no natural charisma, no perfect words. And yet it consistently makes people feel more connected, appreciated, and comfortable. The habit is this: making the conversation about the other person before making it about yourself. It sounds simple. Because it is. But simple does not mean easy. Most people are naturally focused on themselves, their thoughts, their experiences, their opinions, their problems, their goals, their stories. And because everyone is focused on themselves, the person who genuinely focuses on others immediately stands out. Why people enjoy talking about themselves at first glance, this may seem selfish. But it is actually human nature. Every person experiences life from a single perspective, their own. Their experiences are the center of their world because they are the only experiences they directly live every day. As a result, people naturally enjoy discussing topics connected to themselves. Their dreams, their challenges, their families, their interests, their achievements, their struggles. Not because they are narcissistic, because they are human. The mistake most people make: imagine meeting someone new. You mention a recent vacation. Immediately they begin talking about their vacation. You mention a challenge at work. They immediately discuss their own challenge. You mention a hobby. They redirect the conversation toward themselves. This pattern is common, and often unconscious. People relate by sharing their own experiences. But sometimes they do it so quickly that the other person feels overlooked. The conversation becomes a competition for attention, rather than an exchange of understanding. The power of genuine interest. People are drawn toward those who show genuine interest in them. Not fake interest. Not strategic interest. Genuine interest. The kind that asks, "What was that like for you? How did you get interested in that? What happened next?" These questions communicate something powerful: you matter. And everyone appreciates feeling that way. Why curiosity creates connection? Curiosity is one of the most attractive communication qualities. Curious people are engaging because they are engaged. They pay attention, ask thoughtful questions, explore ideas, show interest. This creates energy. Because conversations thrive when both people feel valued. And curiosity is one of the clearest ways to communicate value. The secret behind charisma. Many people assume charismatic individuals are extraordinary speakers. In reality, many charismatic people are exceptional listeners. They make others feel interesting, important, appreciated. They create an emotional experience. And people often mistake that experience for charisma. Because the feeling is so enjoyable. The secret is not always what charismatic people say. It is how they make others feel. Why people remember good conversations. Think about a memorable conversation from your past. Chances are it was not memorable because someone delivered a brilliant speech. It was memorable because you felt something. Heard. Understood. Valued. Respected. Interesting. These emotional experiences leave lasting impressions. And those impressions shape relationships. The "tell me more" habit. One of the simplest conversation habits is using the phrase, "tell me more." These 3 words are remarkably powerful. They communicate curiosity, attention, interest, and encouragement. Most people rarely hear them. Because most conversations move quickly from one topic to another. Yet, "tell me more" invites depth. And depth creates connection. Why validation feels good. People enjoy being around those who validate their experiences. Validation does not mean agreement. It means acknowledgement. For example, "That sounds exciting. I can understand why you'd feel that way. That must have been difficult." These responses make people feel understood. And understanding is deeply satisfying. Because it addresses a fundamental human need. The spotlight principle. Imagine a spotlight. Most people try to place the spotlight on themselves. They want recognition, attention, appreciation. The most likable communicators do something different. They place the spotlight on others. Not permanently, but generously. And people naturally enjoy being around those who make them feel seen. Why people trust those who listen. Trust and likability are closely connected. People trust those who listen. Because listening communicates respect. When someone listens carefully, they demonstrate that your thoughts matter. Your experiences matter. Your perspective matters. This message creates warmth. And warmth strengthens relationships. Avoiding the conversation hijack. One of the easiest ways to weaken connection is conversation hijacking. Someone shares a story. Before they finish, you redirect attention toward yourself. It often happens unintentionally. But the effect is noticeable. The speaker feels interrupted, overshadowed, dismissed. Strong communicators resist this temptation. They allow others to complete their thoughts, explore their stories, finish their experiences. Why questions matter more than answers. Many people focus on having interesting answers. The most engaging communicators focus on asking interesting questions. Questions create discovery, exploration, curiosity, connection. A thoughtful question often contributes more to a conversation than a clever answer. Because questions invite participation. And participation creates engagement. The emotional impact of attention. Attention is one of the most valuable gifts you can give someone. Not because attention is rare. Because genuine attention is rare. Most people are distracted, busy, thinking about something else. The person who is fully present becomes memorable. Not because they are extraordinary. Because they are attentive. The likability formula. People tend to like those who make them feel heard, understood, appreciated, respected, interesting, comfortable. Notice what is missing. Nowhere on that list does it say impressed, overpowered, dominated. Likability grows through connection, not superiority. Why this habit works everywhere. This principle applies almost everywhere. Friendships, dating, networking, leadership, parenting, business, sales, customer service. The details change. Human psychology does not. People consistently respond positively to those who show sincere interest in them. Because interest communicates value. Becoming more memorable. Ironically, one of the best ways to become memorable is to focus less on being remembered, and more on helping others feel remembered. When people leave a conversation feeling seen and appreciated, they associate those feelings with you. And positive emotions create lasting impressions. The ultimate conversation secret. Many people enter conversations wondering, how can I make people like me? A better question is, how can I make people feel valued? Because when people feel valued, liking often follows naturally. Not always, but surprisingly often. And unlike manipulation, genuine interest creates authentic connection. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people do not always remember your accomplishments. They do not always remember your stories. They do not always remember your opinions. But they remember how they felt around you. They remember whether they felt heard, whether they felt important, whether they felt understood. And one of the fastest ways to create those feelings is to focus on them before focusing on yourself. Because the conversation habit that makes people instantly like you is not talking more. It is helping them feel seen. Chapter 9. The most powerful listening technique in the world. Most people believe listening is passive. You stay quiet, nod occasionally, maintain eye contact, and wait for the other person to finish speaking. While these behaviors are helpful, true listening is much more active than most people realize. In fact, the most powerful listening technique in the world is not silence. It is something called reflective listening. Reflective listening is the ability to accurately reflect back what another person is thinking, feeling, or experiencing. It is one of the most effective communication skills ever studied. It builds trust, reduces conflict, strengthens relationships, improves leadership, enhances persuasion, and makes people feel deeply understood. Why most listening fails? The average person listens at only a surface level. They hear words, but miss meaning. They hear facts, but miss emotions. They hear statements, but miss intentions. As a result, misunderstandings occur constantly. People think they understand, but they often understand only partially. Reflective listening solves this problem, because it verifies understanding rather than assuming it. The core principle is simple. Before responding, summarize what you believe the other person means. For example, someone says, "I've been working non-stop and I'm exhausted." A typical response might be, "You should take a vacation." But a reflective response sounds different. It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed and burned out. Notice the difference. The first response jumps to solutions. The second response focuses on understanding. And understanding almost always comes first. Why people love being understood at a deep psychological level. People want to feel understood. Not fixed. Not corrected. Not lectured. Understood. When someone accurately reflects their experience, they feel validated, recognized, seen. This creates an emotional connection that many conversations never achieve. Because understanding satisfies one of the most basic human needs. The magic word: sounds. One of the easiest ways to practice reflective listening is by using phrases such as, "It sounds like," "It seems like," "What I'm hearing is." These phrases communicate curiosity rather than certainty. They allow the speaker to confirm or correct your interpretation, which improves understanding and reduces assumptions. Why assumptions create problems? Many conflicts begin with assumptions. People assume they know what someone means, assume they understand motivations, assume they understand emotions. Often they are wrong. Reflective listening replaces assumptions with clarification. Instead of guessing, you verify. Instead of interpreting silently, you check openly. And clarity prevents countless misunderstandings. The emotional layer. Most communication contains two messages: the factual message and the emotional message. For example, someone says, "My boss criticized my presentation." The factual message concerns the criticism, but the emotional message may involve disappointment, embarrassment, frustration, anger, insecurity. Reflective listening pays attention to both layers, because emotions often matter more than facts. Why reflecting feelings is powerful. People often know their own facts. What they need help processing are their emotions. When you reflect feelings accurately, people feel deeply understood. For example, "It sounds like that really hurt," or "It seems like you're frustrated by the situation." These statements communicate empathy. And empathy strengthens connection. The leadership advantage. Exceptional leaders use reflective listening constantly. When employees raise concerns, effective leaders do not immediately defend themselves. They listen, clarify, reflect. For example, "What I'm hearing is that the team feels overwhelmed by the workload." This demonstrates understanding. And understanding builds trust. Employees are far more likely to support leaders who make them feel heard. Why reflective listening reduces conflict. Most arguments are fueled by misunderstanding. People feel ignored, misrepresented, dismissed. Reflective listening interrupts this cycle, because it forces both parties to slow down and verify understanding. The conversation becomes less reactive, more thoughtful, more collaborative, and collaboration reduces conflict. The relationship transformation. Many relationship problems are not caused by a lack of love. They are caused by a lack of understanding. Partners often hear each other without truly understanding each other. Reflective listening changes this. For example, instead of defending yourself immediately, you might say, "What I'm hearing is that you felt unsupported." That simple statement can transform an argument into a conversation, because the other person feels acknowledged. And acknowledgement lowers defensiveness. Why people say, "Exactly." One of the goals of reflective listening is hearing the word, "exactly." That word signals success. It means the other person feels understood. And once understanding exists, meaningful communication becomes much easier. People are more willing to listen when they first feel heard. The patience factor. Reflective listening requires patience. Many people want to respond immediately, defend immediately, advise immediately, persuade immediately. But effective communicators slow down. They seek understanding before response. And that extra patience often improves the quality of the entire conversation. Why this skill is rare. Reflective listening sounds simple, yet few people practice it consistently. Why? Because it requires discipline. It requires resisting the urge to interrupt, to assume, to fix, to dominate the conversation. And many people never develop that discipline, which is why those who do stand out. The trust accelerator. Trust is built through understanding, and reflective listening accelerates understanding. When people consistently feel understood by you, trust grows naturally. Not because you are persuasive, because you are attentive, and attentiveness communicates care. How to practice today. The next time someone shares a story, resist the urge to respond immediately. Instead, try reflecting. Say, "What I'm hearing is," or "It sounds like." Then summarize their experience, not perfectly, just sincerely. You may be surprised by how differently people respond. The ultimate communication skill. If you could master only one communication technique, reflective listening would be a strong candidate. Because it improves nearly every aspect of communication. Relationships, leadership, negotiation, parenting, friendships, conflict resolution, trust building, influence. The benefits are enormous, and the technique is simple. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: most people want to be heard. Few people feel understood. And the gap between those two experiences is where many communication problems begin. Reflective listening closes that gap. It transforms assumptions into clarity, reactions into understanding, conversations into connections. Because the most powerful listening technique in the world is not hearing someone's words. It is helping them feel understood. And when people feel understood, trust begins to grow. Chapter 10. The one conversation skill that changes every relationship. If you had to choose only one communication skill to improve every relationship in your life, what would it be? Would it be confidence, persuasion, charisma, public speaking, storytelling, negotiation? All of these skills have value. But there is one skill that quietly strengthens almost every human relationship. A skill that improves friendships, romantic relationships, family relationships, workplace relationships, leadership, parenting, and even conversations with strangers. That skill is empathy. Not sympathy, not agreement, not approval, empathy. The ability to understand and appreciate another person's experience from their perspective. Empathy is the bridge between two minds. And every strong relationship is built on that bridge. What empathy really means: many people misunderstand empathy. They believe empathy means agreeing with someone, supporting everything they say, or abandoning their own viewpoint. None of these are true. Empathy simply means, I can see this from your perspective. You may still disagree. You may still hold a different opinion. But you make an effort to understand. And that effort changes everything. Why relationships break down: most relationship problems begin with a simple issue. People stop trying to understand each other. They become focused on defending themselves, proving themselves, correcting each other, winning. The conversation becomes a courtroom. Each person becomes their own lawyer. And no one becomes a listener. The result is predictable. Distance grows. Frustration grows. Connection weakens. Because understanding disappears. The hidden message behind every conflict: during conflict, people often argue about surface issues. Money, responsibilities, time, decisions, opinions. But beneath those issues is usually a deeper message: please understand me. That is often what people are really asking for. Not agreement. Understanding. And when understanding is missing, conflict intensifies. Why empathy lowers defensiveness? Defensiveness thrives when people feel misunderstood. Empathy changes that. Imagine someone says, I understand why you'd feel that way. Instantly, the emotional atmosphere shifts. The person feels acknowledged, recognized, validated. The need to defend themselves decreases. Because someone finally understands. This is one reason empathy is so powerful. It lowers resistance. The difference between sympathy and empathy: sympathy observes pain. Empathy enters it. Sympathy says, that's unfortunate. Empathy says, I can imagine how difficult that must have been. Sympathy remains outside the experience. Empathy attempts to step inside it. And people feel the difference immediately. Because empathy creates connection. Why empathy strengthens trust? Trust grows when people feel understood. And empathy communicates understanding. When someone consistently demonstrates empathy, people feel safer around them. More comfortable. More willing to share honestly. Trust develops naturally. Not because empathy is persuasive. Because empathy is human. The parenting lesson: children need empathy. Not only rules. Not only discipline. Not only guidance. Empathy. When children feel understood, they become more receptive, more cooperative, more connected. The same principle applies to adults. People respond better when they feel understood, regardless of age. The leadership lesson: exceptional leaders practice empathy daily. They seek to understand employee concerns, customer frustrations, team challenges. Not because empathy is soft. Because empathy provides information. The more leaders understand people, the better decisions they make. Empathy improves leadership because leadership is ultimately about people. And understanding people improves outcomes. Why empathy creates loyalty? People rarely stay loyal to those who consistently misunderstand them. But they often remain loyal to those who understand them deeply. Because understanding creates emotional connection. And emotional connection creates loyalty. Whether in friendships, relationships, leadership, or business, loyalty often follows understanding. The empathy question. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself during any conversation is, what might this feel like from their perspective? This question shifts your focus away from judgment, away from assumptions, away from immediate reactions, toward understanding. And understanding improves communication. Why empathy is difficult? Empathy sounds simple, but it can be challenging, especially during disagreement, especially when emotions are high, especially when you believe you are right. Because empathy requires temporarily setting aside your own perspective, not abandoning it, just pausing it long enough to explore someone else's experience. That requires maturity and self-control. The cost of lacking empathy. Without empathy, conversations become transactional, relationships become shallow, misunderstandings multiply, trust weakens, connection fades. Because people do not simply want interaction, they want understanding. And empathy provides it. Why being right is not enough. Many people focus heavily on being correct. And correctness matters. But correctness alone rarely strengthens relationships. You can be right and still damage trust. You can be right and still create distance. You can be right and still fail to connect. Empathy balances truth with understanding. And that balance creates healthier communication. The most influential people use empathy. The most influential people often possess a remarkable ability. They understand how others think and feel. This understanding allows them to communicate more effectively, resolve conflicts more successfully, build relationships more quickly, and earn trust more consistently. Empathy is not merely a relationship skill. It is an influence skill. Practicing empathy daily. Empathy can be developed. Like any skill, start by asking, what might they be feeling? What concerns might they have? What experiences shaped this perspective? What am I missing? These questions expand understanding, and expanded understanding improves communication. The relationship transformer. Imagine applying empathy consistently. At home, at work, with friends, with family, with strangers. Arguments become calmer. Conversations become deeper. Trust becomes stronger. Relationships become healthier. Not because everyone suddenly agrees. Because understanding increases. The skill that changes everything. Many communication skills improve conversations. Empathy improves relationships. And relationships shape much of life. This is why empathy is so powerful. It influences nearly every human interaction. It creates connection where distance exists, understanding where confusion exists, trust where uncertainty exists. Final reflection. Throughout this book, we have explored powerful phrases, listening skills, trust-building habits, emotional safety, and meaningful questions. All of them point toward one central truth. People want to feel understood. More than impressed. More than persuaded. More than corrected, understood. And empathy is one of the most reliable ways to provide that experience. Conclusion. The most powerful thing you can say in any conversation is not always a statement. Sometimes it is a question. Sometimes it is a reflection. Sometimes it is a moment of silence. Sometimes it is simply, help me understand. Because understanding changes everything. It transforms conflict into cooperation, distance into connection, defensiveness into openness, strangers into friends, and conversations into relationships. The greatest communicators are not those who dominate conversations. They are those who create understanding. And the people who create understanding create influence, trust, and connection wherever they go. Because in the end, every meaningful conversation is built on a simple human desire, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood.